Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the number one marketing and practice growth podcast for high-performing private practice hearing care leaders. It's Friday, and this is my end-of-week roundup of what's top of mind after 7 days of helping some of the world's best private practices to attract high-quality patients, fight the evil forces of manufacturer-owned chains, and be impossible to compete with. My name's Ollie Luke. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, and let's have a chat. So welcome along to another episode of the Business of Hearing podcast. And once again, thank you for lending me your ears. And as always, I'll promise to repay your time as effectively as possible. And the goal of today's episode is to repay your time with things you can do to start collecting more money. Because we're going to get into the granular details of how you can add more dollars to your pocket, all through growing the average transaction value. And what I mean by that is, how do we have patients pay you more money for the work and services that you provide? Because I have a very, very strong belief that you should be the most expensive practice in your area. You've got to be the cheapest or the most expensive. The middle is a mess. And you're never going to win the cheapest battle because you're fighting groups with cost of goods half the price of yours and all the scales of economy that they have. And the middle is a super, super confusing place to be. Being the most expensive, which means that you can reinvest in experience and the touches that mean you can justify being the most expensive, is where the magic exists, where you can grow reputation, grow margins, and run a super successful practice that is difficult to compete with. But let's get into the granular stuff. How can you grow average transaction value? Because there's three ways to fundamentally grow a practice, right? You get more patients, you get them to spend more, you get them to spend more often, and the spend more category is the real magic here. And in a previous episode, I spoke about how you can have more people say yes. So rather than 30% of people say yes, how can we get up to 40%, 50%, 60%, etc.? Because that is one of the key levers that you can pull to have a dramatic difference on the success of your practice without needing more patient flow. This is another. How can we get them to spend more? How can we get them to, rather than spend X number, how can we grow that number and have them comfortably handing over that amount of money for the services and expertise that you provide? And I want to take you through three big things that you can do in order to do this. But it all is underpinned by one thing, and that one thing is you need to put your prices up. And this is uncomfortable. I get a lot of pushback on this. I can't put my prices up, and there's a host of reasons I've had. My staff won't like it, through to our patients won't pay it, through to that'll make me a lot more expensive than the competitors, through to it's uncomfortable, I don't want to do it. There's so many reasons why we're always hesitant to put our prices up. But here's the big thing that I want to reinforce. Who will notice that your prices have gone up? Exclude your staff out of this, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But who's going to notice that your prices have increased? The patient that's scheduled for tomorrow that's never visited you will not know that your prices have increased. They don't know what your prices were yesterday, last week, last year, in 1996. It doesn't really matter. They need to know the price that's being presented to them today. And the patient that may know that the price has gone up is the returning patient. It's the patient that bought 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that may turn up and see that premium technology with a service plan now is more expensive than it was in 2019, in 2020. Now, if that's the concern, let's just play this through. Let's say the patient that last upgraded in 2021 that's returning now is going to see that your price is $1,000 more. Is this going to be a big shock to them? Is this actually an issue, or is this your own head shit that will be causing this challenge? Because I can't help but think, patient that paid a certain price, let's say they paid $6,500 in 2021. Now, they're coming to you now in 2025 where they've got to leave the house that costs them a lot more to run on a monthly basis. They've got to get in a car, which the gas costs a lot more to get to you. They're going to stop at Starbucks on the way and buy a bullshit chino for about $14 that used to cost $9. Everything else in their life has increased in price. So the belief they're going to rock up to you and then be annoyed that your prices have gone up as well. In the same way, we just all expect prices to go up because that is inflation and that is the world around us. You trying to keep your pricing in here, while cost of goods going up, staffing's going up, all your service providers that you pay on a monthly basis are going up. The only thing taking the hit is your margins, your profitability, the promises and deliverables that you need to make to your family and the people you've made commitments towards. That's the thing that's getting squeezed. Please, please, please put your prices up. Nobody really will notice. The people that will notice will be your staff and maybe a handful of existing patients. And if they're in a situation where they're not willing to pay the prices, then maybe you need to go after new patients, and that is naturally going to happen. But let's just come on to that staff thing, because I have had this pushback that our staff won't like the prices increased. Staff don't like change. Here's the big thing. If your staff are making decisions around how you run your practice, around how much you charge for things because they don't like change, then they're probably going to feel quite a dramatic change when you run out of runway because you're not making the margins you need to make, and they end up out of a job and the business ends up nosediving. Like, this is one of the responsibilities and duties that you need to take as a practice leader, is to make unpopular decisions for the greater good of the success of the organization, to ensure that you can deliver the careers that these individuals on your team want. If they're making decisions around how you run the practice, how you charge, what you should charge, then you need to take control of that, because it's not they're not making the financial decisions, they're making the convenient decisions. And know that there's two very different factors here, the difference between business owners and employees. The biggest motivator for business owners, the first thing we think about in the morning and the last thing we think about at night, is cash, because we've got to keep the lifeblood of that business in place. Take most employees, like, the biggest thing that they think about is minimizing risk. Like, an employee doesn't want to make dramatic risk. They want to mitigate risk as much as possible. They won't make any big decisions that have high risk, because high risk decisions result in high risk outcomes, and high risk outcomes can result in them being in a compromised position. We're wired so differently, and our responsibilities and duties need to be very differently put. You need to be somewhat risk averse as a business owner. They naturally are not so risk averse, given that risk usually results in risk. So, that's a really key point ahead of me jumping into these three things. Like, putting your pricing up is so key, and being one of the most expensive practices in your area is a smart business move. It's not a marketing gimmick. It's not a quick way to make an extra buck. It's positioning of where you sit. You can spend more to position yourself better. You can spend more on patient experience. You can spend more on service to attract better quality patients that appreciate all that you do and are willing to pay the dollars in exchange for the value and support that you deliver for them. So let's jump into these three big things that you can do in order to grow average transaction value and increase your pricing. Now, first of all, let's talk pricing, because this is the key one. You can put your prices up. That's a very, very easy thing to do that you can do tomorrow. The bigger job that you need to do is ensure that you're packaging your pricing and what you offer the patient in the most value-rich way possible. And what I mean by that is, most practices' pricing is very, very weak and difficult to compare to others, and they feel very, very expensive. Most practices are like, okay, we do premium technology, we do 3-year warranty, 3-year L&D, and unlimited service, and it's $6,500. The issue is, Costco also say we do premium technology, we do 3-year warranty, we do 2-year L&D, we do a 6-month trial, and we're always here when you need us, and you can grab a hot dog and a pizza, come at weekends, and it's super convenient. And they're $2,500. Big dramatic differences in those pricing pieces. Your job needs to be to actually help patients understand what they're actually buying with you, because you and I know what you offer and what you do for patients and how you go above and beyond is significantly different to Costco. But right now, if the patient's making a decision based on the line items that you've given them, and they're looking at Costco, the differences aren't that vast. You need to package this up. And what does that mean? Get the line items in. Get really granular. What do you do for patients? Because service is not the explanation. Everybody says they deliver service. What is service? You really need to get super, super clear on that, because McDonald's claim they'll give you customer service, but the Ritz-Carlton claim they'll give you customer service. Big differences between those two levels of service. And the more you can articulate what that is, does that mean, is there a comprehensive evaluation following audiological best practices focused on ABC Hearing's unique journey to better hearing? Do you have preventative maintenance appointments, i.e. clean and checks, and how often do you have them, and what does that routine and schedule look like? Do they have any priority access to a special phone line as an existing patient? Like, is there a turnaround time on if they want to schedule an appointment? Like, all the line items. What about earwax removal? What about do they get loaners if something goes wrong? How would that work? Because all these things need explanation. Like, you can almost line item it in a way that you expect the patient to understand. But just have this understanding. Warranties is a big one. Like, you should not just say you have a warranty. It needs to be like a fully managed warranty. Because I have a warranty on my fridge freezer. But I know that if my fridge freezer broken, I'd be looking on the back of it, ringing a number, sitting on hold for 45 minutes, then having an absolute nightmare to get it replaced. That's not the same with you. If a patient has an issue with devices, they're not calling the manufacturer and having to go through a nightmare customer service experience and be without devices for weeks and not being able to hear. They'll come to you and you'll do all the work for them, fit them with some loaners, ensure that they don't have any breakages in their journey and their experience with better hearing. Like, that needs line iteming. Get all those details very, very specifically outlined. And before you know it, the list of what you deliver versus everyone else is so dramatic that you've got your point of difference and you can have some poise around being the premium practice because you deliver premium service that is well articulated and explained. Like, that is the key one. Like, get your pricing done correctly. And pricing is packaging. Like, how is everything explained? How does a patient understand everything they get with you that is dramatically different to anyone else? And it becomes very difficult to compare you to anyone else because this is comparing the Ritz-Carlton to a budget motel. Like, it's just so obvious that you are the logical best option if they want high quality care and all the little considerations thought out in advance by you. I think that is a key one. Like, that's so fundamental to get right. What do you have from there? Well, there's two things that I want to touch on. The first one is decoy pricing. Now, this is, and look in any other industry, you see this, right? If you go to the cinema to watch a movie and you want popcorn, you know that nobody really buys the medium popcorn. It's there in order to make the large look better value for money. If the small is $5 and the large is $10, the medium usually sits at about $9. It's like, how do we make it a no-brainer that if somebody's looking at medium, it's obvious they should just get the large and spend the extra $1? And there's a lot that exists in so many markets and so many situations where there's a price there just to anchor a buying decision in certain areas. And depending on how many levels of technology that you can have, like, you could use one of your packages to be decoy focused. And this is to aid the experience of the patient and make it easier for them to make a decision. And this could be that if you've got your all-inclusive plan at $7,500 and you've got your entry level at $5,000, where does that medium sit? Maybe it should sit at like $6,800, whether it's obvious that everyone's going to pay an extra $700 to get better technology and maybe a few of the extra perks, an extra year service plan, whatever you decide to include in that top package. Like, decoy pricing is one of the easy things you can do, depending on what your average transaction value is now, in order to boost it and have patients looking up at the more logical options. Like, that is such an easy one. And look at wine menus. They're a great way of how that can be done in order to make that dramatic impact. Here's the last one that I think is really, really key and something that you could implement today, even if your existing pricing is well dialed in, well planned. There is a big difference between the financial weight of a number and the emotional weight of a number. And what I mean by that is the way that we look at numbers and make buying decisions typically is we round up and round down in our head to understand the weight of a financial buying decision. So if, let's say, your hearing care plan for premium technology is $6,890, hypothetically. Now, if I look at that, and in my mind I go, that's $7,000. That's a $7,000 decision. That's the weighted decision. I weigh it on whether I want to make that decision. Now, the difference between that and if it was $7,190, I'd look at that and go, $7,190, that's a $7,000 buying decision. I've got to make the decision on whether I want to spend $7,000 on that. Like, the dramatic difference between those numbers financially is a fair amount, right? We've literally got an extra $300 if I've done terrible maths quickly there, in extra revenue, which is pure profit, of course. Yet the financial, the emotional weight of that buying decision is exactly the same. We will not find, maybe it's 1 in 1,000 patients that would have said yes to 68.90, but no to 71.90. Like that is such a rarity, because the weight of the decision from an emotional perspective is somewhat identical, but the financial perspective is an extra $300, extra revenue, pretty much all profit, because you were going to be doing the work without charging that anyway. Now, if you can add an extra few $100s per transaction across every single transaction that you do on an annual basis, run some quick numbers for me. How many hearing aid sales do you have on an annual basis? How many patients do you support on a monthly basis, an annual basis? And even if it's 50 patients a month, take 50 patients a month, put that over 600 patients over the course of the year, do that by $300, and that's pretty tasty, right? $300 by 600 patients. What are we talking? An extra $180,000 a year pure profit in your pocket. It's not too shabby, but this is work to do. It needs to be done correctly, and it needs to be implemented. But it's so easy not to do the work that it's easy not to do. Like it's as easy to do it as it is not to do it. And just doing it is a ton of extra money if you can just grow average transaction value, even subtly, without making any dramatic changes that have any negative consequences that probably exist more in your own head than the actual truth. So they're the few things that I'd be considering right now. Please be the most expensive practice in your area. I know it's uncomfortable. It challenges us completely. But if you look in any other market, they're the ones that usually have the most margin. They're the ones that are usually most oversubscribed with customers, clients, patients. They're the ones that typically have the strongest businesses, that have the strongest EBITDA, that end up selling for the largest amount over time and being the most valuable business. So that is super, super key. Please get your pricing structured correctly. Please don't be saying we sell hearing aids plus service. No, you sell solutions, you sell treatment plans, you help people to achieve outcomes, and you have a methodical process of how you do it. And hearing aids are just one of the components of that. And you can articulate it very, very intelligently. So you become very difficult to price shop and very different to anybody else in the market. Consider where that decoy price and package sits in order to have people ascend to more premium options in the market. And then finally from there, how can you alter the numbers to make a financial difference without an emotional difference from the buying decision perspective? But get those things dialed in, and you'll be collecting a lot of extra money without even considering extra patient flow on top. This is one of them levers that you can pull to add an extra ton of money into your pocket and on the end of year bottom line without making any huge significant decisions, without it costing you anything to do. This is just time, energy, and focus to get this done correctly. Hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully I've repaid your time that you've spent with me as much as possible. But the real defining factor on whether this is a waste of your time or whether this is the most valuable, however so many minutes you've spent with me, is if you take action. Please, 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 go ahead and do this. Look at your pricing. Just implement one of the things I've spoken about. And when you start collecting more money, then come back and let's go again and let me share something else that you can put into your practice. I appreciate your time greatly, and I'll be back again next week with another episode. And there we have it. Another episode has come to an end, and I have a quick favor to ask. If you have found this helpful, then who do you know who should listen to this podcast? I strongly believe a rising tide lifts all boats, and right now, private practice needs to stick together to fight these big, gormless groups and these manufacturer-owned Goliaths that are looking to take market share from us. Consider who should be listening, pass on the word about the Business of Hearing podcast, and I'll see you again next week.